Recording in progress.
Welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Today, it is my great pleasure to bring you a super important program because you're going to get the truth here. Well, you always get the truth from me, even though I know it's shocking to a lot of people, but I don't pussyfoot. But this is even more more truth because the title of the show is Inside Israel, where trauma is routine and silence suspicious. Now, the reason why I say it's even more double truthful is because my guest today is Chava Kleinman, and she is in Israel, and has known what it is like even before October 7th. She's a social worker. She has over 25 years of experience in Israel, and she is working with people, especially children, helping them cope with the trauma of terrorism because terrorism did not start on October 7th. It just got a lot worse. So the reason why I say it's double truth is because, whatever you've been hearing in the mainstream media, even the good media, the not mainstream, what I mean is like Fox and um, uh, OAN and Newsmax and so on, the better media. But you don't always get the real, the raw truth. And in the mainstream media, you get what Hamas wants you to think because Hamas is very active as far as their PR. They have the best PR in the world, and they get to every single news outlet and try to convince them of what's happening in Israel, try to convince them that Israel is committing genocide, that Israel is doing all kinds of horrible things, and Hamas are the angels. They are just trying to deliver the poor Palestinians, to protect them from being oppressed by the oppressive Israelis, et cetera, et cetera. Things like telling the world that Israel steals all the food and other supplies before they can get to these poor Palestinians, and so on. And in fact, whatever you hear in the media, the mainstream media that came from Hamas, the opposite is true. In terms of things stealing, situations where supplies were stolen, it was Hamas. It is Hamas who steals supplies because they then sell them to these Palestinians who they're supposed to be taking care of, or want you to believe they're taking care of, protecting from the big bad Israelis. Um, so, uh, my dog in the background is echoing what I'm saying, literally, but hopefully he will calm down. But he's very upset about this too. So, without further ado, I will welcome Chava Kleinman to the show. Welcome, Chava.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Um,
Carole.
it's wonderful. It's so important that the truth gets out, because I have people, intelligent people. I speak with intelligent people, friends, Jewish people, non-Jewish people, people who you would think you would expect would know better. In fact, I was just on a show the other day, a television show, and the host, I was kind of a surprise. I didn't expect this from him, but he was asking me, and it wasn't in the way to sort of generate controversy, generate talk, like sometimes you would do to say the opposite, and then you get your guest to just, come right in there and say, "Oh no."
Right.
No." It was, I mean, I did do that, but I think it was really that he believed this, that the things that I've been saying, that Hamas is the good guys, and Israel are the bad guys. And some of the things, like he gave the example of stealing, of genocide, of course, that's always a good one, and then stealing the supplies and all that. And that's what people here believe in America and all in Europe, and we're all around the world. Because Hamas, we need better PR people in Israel. I don't get it.
100%.
So take it away. Well, before you get into the meat,
Yeah.
though, what I'd really like to know is your story. where were you born? How did you wind up in Israel? Or maybe you were born in Israel, but how did you get involved in this kind of help that you're doing right now?
Sure. Okay, so I actually grew up in Montreal, Canada. I
Huh.
lived there until I finished high school there, and then I grew up with four siblings, four brothers actually. I'm the oldest, the only girl, and the eldest of four brothers who all became doctors actually, which I'll refer to in a minute, medical doctors.
Uh-huh.
And my parents, my father was a social worker, is a social worker. He ran
Huh.
organizations. My mother's a psychologist. So whenever anybody asked me why I went into mental health, I said, just look. So, so I grew up there, and after I finished high school, I decided to come to Israel, to study for a year. And I came here and I just realized that I felt like this was home and this is where I should be. And basically called back home and said, I'm staying. And my parents, my family was very supportive. Of course, they wanted me to come back. And for a few years, my mother kept sending me university applications to McGill University in Montreal, even though I said, Mom, I'm done my degree by now, you can give up. But
You've done your degree. What do you mean? You did it, your college in Israel?
yeah, I went to college in Israel.
Uh-huh.
I actually did a year of biology in Hebrew University. I tried that track of maybe medical school, but I said it's not for me. In the end, I want to help people. And so I studied social work.
Doctors don't help people, right?
Not, no, sorry, I want to help people in a different way.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Um, yes, doctors help people for sure. Um, and I studied in Bar-Ilan University. I did my first degree in social work. And at that point, actually, my husband, who was originally from Toronto, also, but we kind of met up here again, and we decided that we wanted to stay here and get married and basically raise our family here in Israel.
So, so before you went to Israel, did you know how to speak Hebrew?
So I went to a Jewish day school where yeah, I mean, I wasn't fluent, but I knew how to read, I knew how to write, and I understood basic Hebrew. It was very challenging to do my degree here. I remember sitting reading journals and articles with a dictionary in the days when people used dictionaries.
Yes.
Um,
That's what
but
I
but
did. That's what I
yeah.
did when I went to medical school in Belgium
Oh,
in French.
right.
And
Yeah,
I mean, I had taken French during my school years
right.
before that. But yes, the book that you're supposed to be learning and the dictionary
Right.
right by. Yes.
Yeah.
So go
Today,
ahead.
today people don't know what a dictionary is, but
Yes, right.
yeah, so that's
So
what so
wait a second. And your
sure.
husband, he
Yeah.
was someone who you had been dating in Canada?
Actually, yes, this is a really funny story, but we met in summer camp when we were 13 years old.
Oh my
Um,
God, yeah.
yeah, we were boyfriend and girlfriend when we were 13.
Uh-huh.
And then off and on throughout the years, and then we kind of hooked up again later on in life. Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, it
Nice
was kind of
story.
yeah, a cute story. And so yeah, so that's basically, and I just decided to stay here and to be here, and actually going to school here and doing my stage here, I felt it made it much easier because, when you're young, you can adapt to almost any situation. And that way I got oriented to the culture and to the language and made connections. And yeah, so that's basically how I started off.
And did he come in time to do college too in Israel?
Yes, he did. He's an architect, so he did architecture school here in Israel as well.
Hmm.
And yeah, during those years, we got married. I had my first three children, well, pretty much while I was in school.
Wow.
And then after I graduated, I began my first job as a social worker, part-time social worker in a social services agency here in Israel. And
Uh-huh.
that's sort of how I started off my career. And
And where in Israel?
So we live in a place called Shiloh, which is in Samaria, which some people refer to as the West Bank.
Uh,
So basically, we lived here from the beginning. I said back then, it's a beautiful place and a beautiful area, but it's kind of far out. I'm not going to get stuck there. 30 years later, we're here and we built a beautiful home and we raised our 5 children here.
Wow.
And yeah, and now I have 2 grandchildren even that live here. My son and daughter-in-law live here about 5 minutes away from us. So it's actually really nice and a beautiful, beautiful place to live. So yeah, so that's how my story in a nutshell, how I got here and how I started my career.
That's
Um,
a lovely story.
yeah.
Now, are your parents still in Canada?
So the other lovely part of the story is that about 15 years ago, my parents moved here as well, and they live in Jerusalem.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's
And
nice.
my mother-in-law as well, she remarried and also she actually lives here in our community in Shiloh. And one of my brothers lives here. The rest of them are still scattered around North America. But yeah, so it's nice.
Uh-huh.
We were alone for many years, raised our children alone, but today there's really much more of a family and it's really,
Uh,
really nice to see.
that's really a
Yeah.
nice story.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Yes.
tell tell us about how what it was like in Israel pre um just
Yeah.
pre October 7th.
October 7th.
And then we'll talk about post October 7th.
Yeah. So as you said, I mean, unfortunately, throughout all the years here in Israel, we know terrorism. There were terror attacks. There were times when it was worse, this intifada or that intifada. There were times when it was calm, but it's something that we always sort of experience. We send our sons to the army. Unfortunately, people, here and there would get injured or wounded. So terror is something that we always knew, unfortunately, and experienced and had to deal with. Terror attacks, everywhere, all over, sort of, different attacks, air attacks, and missiles throughout the years. And so there were things in place, programming, therapy programs. People knew how to deal with it. I mean, I trained to deal with emergency situations throughout my whole career. I did special courses on telling families, God forbid, when their loved one was killed. So like you said, it wasn't something that was new, but October 7th was just it just changed everything. I mean, the intensity of what happened on that day, I think it sort of shattered, it's sad to say this, but any sort of sense of safety that people really had. Because, even people who were not right there in the South on that day, but what was happening on the North and what was happening in all different areas, people were literally just scared to leave their houses, and nobody knew or could possibly fathom what was going on around us. So I think it's that sense of just, kind of all hell breaks loose, if you want to say it that way. And that's what really kind of changed the situation. And at that point
Uh-huh.
also nobody could possibly imagine that it was going to last that long. We thought, okay, a month, 2 months, like when I'm still giving talks today, more than a year and a half later, it's sort of unbelievable that we're still in this situation. So I think that's, the intensity and the length of it. I mean, Israel didn't know wars that were this long. So those are the kind of things that I think that really kind of
Uh-huh.
changed the situation.
And where were you on October 7th?
So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do, and then that's the context to my story. So as you mentioned, I've been a social worker. I was a social work manager for almost 18 years in a social service agency not far from here. And about 7 years ago, I moved to be the director of community services here in our area of Shiloh. We had COVID, which was our first crisis, and then we finished COVID. I said, what could possibly come next? And I
Yeah.
regret the day that I ever said that out loud. And then the war began. Um, and so part of my job, like we just said, in general, was managing emergency and crisis, and telling people, God forbid, when people were killed or murdered, or dealing with any crisis that came up. On October 7th, um, I was at home, and my phone was ringing and ringing and ringing, and it was in the bedroom, and I didn't even hear it. And then at one point, I went in to get something, and I saw that I had got like a tremendous amount of phone calls, and I understood that I had to pick it up, even though it was a holiday, and I don't usually answer the phone on the holiday. And the first call that I got, and somebody said to me from our local council emergency team, was, Chava, we have a hostage that was taken from a party in the south, and we need to get to work and tell their families. I'm telling you, Dr. Carole, I said, I don't understand what you're saying to me. What are you talking about? A hostage in a party in the South? What are you talking about? It took
Yeah.
me I really had to ask 4 times for them to tell me what was going on and so that I could process what they were saying to me. Um, that's how October 7th started to me. So for me, Avinatan Or, who was the first hostage that everybody saw in those videos, he was taken with Noah Argamani, his girlfriend.
Uh-huh.
So he is from our community, and that was what they were trying to tell me. So that was,
He
that
was
was the
fr- he was
introduction.
he was from Shiloh,
Yeah, yeah. His family lives
and
here.
on the motorbikes you're talking about.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
You know, I
Exactly.
I have him in my oh, we're gonna have to go to a break now,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have him as I'll tell you a little more later. I did a for the first anniversary of October 7th, I did a music video about October 7th and terrorism and all that, and I have some pictures of it, and that's in
Wow.
the video. All right, and
Wow.
that's on my
Okay.
website, terroristtherapist.com. Anyway, we'll get to
Okay.
that later.
Yeah.
But we need to take a break.
Okay.
Um, my guest is Chava Kleinman. We've begun talking about what's really going on inside Israel, so stay tuned. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch, where we're talking today about inside Israel, where trauma is routine and silence is suspicious, with my guest, perfect person to be telling you what's really going on inside Israel, Chava Kleinman. She is the vice president of the Shiloh. I'm just realizing that I've been pronouncing it wrong. The Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, and she's a social worker for over 25 years and lives in Israel, moved to Israel right after. I admire your dedication. Moved to Israel right after high school and has stayed there ever since and gathered her boyfriend and who's now her husband and children and her family, original family and all that. So, okay. So we were talking about the difference after October 7th. And um and you were talking about how, how you first heard about what was going on and how confusing it was. So why don't you just take it from
Yeah.
there?
So that was how we started off with the knowledge of this hostage and sort of how we deal with it and tell their family. And at that point, just more information started coming in about what was going on and what had happened on the news. And then um, sirens that were starting in different places in the country. And then of course that my eldest son, who's 27 now, basically realized he had to be called up and he was supposed to go off to Gaza to fight. And that was really kind of when it all started settling in of, what is happening here and how the day kind of progressed. Like I said, everybody was scared to leave their houses. Like nobody understood what was going on. Maybe there were terrorists all over the country, no matter where you were. It was this fear of a fear that I don't think anybody's ever experienced. A fear of the unknown, but of, we didn't even understand how bad the situation was then, but people were actually just scared and didn't understand what was going on. So,
Well,
so as
well,
the
well,
day,
wait, let me just, but how come how come the radio and television stations weren't, giving updates or,
so so they were starting to give updates, but I really remember this, like the numbers, we kept seeing them go up of, how many people were murdered or kidnapped. Nobody, there was such chaos, Dr. Carol. The people, they
mm,
didn't know in the beginning what was going on, really. And we
mm,
didn't know. Unfortunately, there was a lot of chaos. I think even a lot of the army and all of, security didn't understand how bad it was. And as time went on, we started to understand more and more, but there wasn't a clear picture of what was going on right away. There
mhm.
just wasn't. Um, and there was warnings for people not to leave their houses because they didn't understand at that point, where the terrorists had gone to and what was happening. And so it was really like this unknown, even though, we have media and television and cell phones and social media, it was almost a feeling of, back in when like you weren't online every second, even though we were, but it was just a lot of not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah, online too. I would think like individual people, but yes. I mean, I think also it was
Yeah.
piercing through the veil of the sense of security. I mean, even though, yes, of course, as you were saying, for years and years there have been
Yeah.
threats and terror attacks and blah blah blah. But there's also a sense in Israel. I've been to oh, let me just back up. I've been to
Yeah.
Israel. Um,
Right.
so far only once, but I had my daughter's bas mitzvah
Mm,
Israel at Masada. And so there's a sense, even though you know that there are enemies all around the country,
that's right.
there's a sense that you are safe regardless.
Exactly.
So I think
Exactly.
wasn't that part of the issue too, that
That's
people had to
exactly.
realize,
So I just want to tell you about that because let's say where we live, like I said, we live in an area, there are Arab villages around us, there are things that go on the roads, but generally we feel very safe in our community. We have a good security system. It's a beautiful place to live. But after what happened in the South on October 7th, the sense of security was completely shattered because everybody believed, that we always thought, okay, well, we're safe, we're secure, we have security, we have the army. But that was shattered. And then, like you said, it was just sort of this like sense of security that was really, really, really just taken away. And that's kind of what happened. And I actually remember people were coming up with all kinds of plans. I was getting these phone calls from people saying, Chava, we made this, in our attic. We put this and we're going to hide here. I'm telling you. And it really reminded me of like Anne Frank
yeah,
situations from the
uh-huh.
Holocaust. And when people were calling me at the beginning, I said to my husband, oh my God, everybody's gone crazy. Like, what's going on? And then I said, actually, no, they haven't gone crazy. They're reacting totally normal to a very, very crazy situation. And that's sort of when it started to understand what I couldn't imagine what we were looking at for the next year and a half, but what was going on. I mean, at the same time, so many people were called up to reserve duty. Just in our community, there was 200 fathers, husbands, just called right up to war. So they were leaving their families, scared, unknown what was happening. They people couldn't imagine what would happen, and our community felt unprotected. And in general, people, were just basically almost all the men were gone. And so, in my role, I was like, okay, we can take control, we can do this. I built a group of women together that we kind of said, no, we can do this. We did COVID, we could do this. At that point, I
Mhm.
didn't understand how crazy it was going to be. Um, but like I said, I mean, the first 2 weeks were completely terrifying. I mean, really, there were people weren't, I mean, I wasn't sleeping. Nobody was sleeping. We were just kind of, going, trying to figure out, trying to, help families that, the fathers had gone. I had a lot of conversations with mothers at that point who didn't want to tell their kids what was going on. They didn't want to tell their children. They're like, I'll just freak them out. I'll scare them more. And I said, no, no, no. You have to tell them what, not all the details and not, I'm telling you, I didn't even know all the details. I didn't watch all those crazy videos. I couldn't. I was, just sort of dealing with the situation. And I actually think that helped me get through it. But just, you have to I was trying to tell mothers that you have to give your children some basic knowledge of what's going on and also some basic skills of, God forbid if something happens, what do? We go into our safe room, we hide, as much as that seems scary to a child, it's important to give them that kind of information because those are the tools that are going to help them deal with it. So there was a lot of that going on, just getting people together, to talk, to be together, not to feel alone in their houses. So in that sense, it was very different than in COVID. It was like, okay, let's get
Uh-huh.
together. Let's get, we opened up the gym here and we got, children and mothers together so they could talk, so they could be together, so they didn't feel alone.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I actually really remember that I was talking to my husband at that point, and I said, I finally understand, sometimes people say Israelis have a little bit of attitude, or people chutzpah, and
Yeah.
I finally said to my husband, I finally get it. I looked at what my children were going through and my neighbors were going through and our whole community, and I said, I get it. This is a generation that's grown up in years of trauma. And so, we kind of understand that the attitude or the sense of fear that they grew up with. And that's
Huh.
when I started to understand a little bit of what was
Well,
a little bit of what we were going to
what
see.
generation are you talking about? What do you like?
I'm talking about, like we said, all the year, basically generations of children that have grown up in Israel have known terror and have known, wars.
Huh?
So I kind of started to understand what, I just looked at, what the children and what they were going through and what they were thinking, and their fathers were gone, and they were thinking that any minute, terrorists could come and do what happened on October 7th in the South. And so I just started to kind of understand, or to think about what was going through children's heads at
Well,
that point.
that's very interesting that you said that
Mhm.
um because it's sort of something came into my mind that
Yeah,
it's true that people do say that about, some people say that about some Israelis and so on.
right.
Um,
Hmm.
and some people say that about Jews in general, and I think it's
Yeah,
both
that's true.
true.
Right.
Um, Israelis maybe a little more so, but like I'm from New York.
Right.
Certainly New York Jews have a lot of
Yeah.
chutzpah too. Um, and but it what made me think of was, how survivors of the Holocaust have a lot of chutzpah, have mostly all, once they came to America or some other country, once they survived and got out of Germany, most of them have become really successful. And it is that chutzpah. It's like you can't, I'm not afraid of anything. Look what I've been through,
Right. Right. Right.
And I'm not that I'm not saying that comparing that to a life growing up in New York, even in Forest Hills, that's not exactly the same uh,
Right.
challenge as being in the
Right.
Holocaust, but you carry that generational chutzpah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Actually, it's interesting that you said, because I think that in the beginning of the war, that's what pretty much everybody here, as devastated as we were, as scared as we were, everyone's like, we can handle this. We can do this. We're resilient. We've handled worse, or not worse, but I think what happened though, as time went on, that superhero, we're all superheroes. As much as really people are resilient and amazing, and we see our soldiers going and doing reserve duty and fighting, and even what children have been going through, and mothers and families, but people got tired and started to break down, and I'll just say, we're doing so many things to support families and getting women out and children and everything possible, and then we had a fallen soldier just from our community who was killed after a few weeks into the war. A very, very connected family to everybody here, and children of every age, and that was another step of, okay, it's getting closer and closer. And the circles at one point, it sort of, when you have a trauma situation, the way we do it, the way we work is you look at circles of people who are affected and try to give them some kind of intervention. But at one point, the circles just became so wide and everybody was affected.
Mm,
And it was, wasn't okay, let's do some kind of intervention here. Let's do some intervention here. I said, Chava, we need to think bigger. This, it's not going to work like this. And so that's really when, in the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, we started to think on a much greater level, and realize also that we couldn't do this alone. And we had to start also raising money and building programs and reaching out to people to help. And I think that it was just a certain point when I said, as much as everybody's going through, I really want to focus on the children because the children are our next generation. And if we can't keep them strong and help them build hope for the future, then, what is the future of our country going to look like?
Uh-huh.
So that's, and like we said, like, I'll just tell you, actually, it's important to say that the Shiloh Children's Fund was started by David Rubin many years ago. Like you said, before October 7th. In 2001, he was in a terror attack with his 3-year-old son. He was shot at when he was driving home from Jerusalem, and he was shot in the leg, David, and his 3-year-old son was shot at, and the bullet kind of just grazed his neck. It was like a total miracle that they made it out of. And after this event, David decided that he needed to do something to change and to help deal with the trauma that he saw that his children were going through after this attack. And so, after October 7th, obviously, the needs became greater and greater. And so we at that point were helping to also give mobile therapists in the south and the north, and just starting to, the needs grew and grew and grew, and the numbers grew, and we also, you had to be more creative about what kind of therapy you were going to offer, because if at one point you were able to offer private therapy or even some group therapy, it was just the needs were so great. So let's say, for example, one of the programs we opened up was an open studio where children could come to like an art center and work with a therapist who was there, but choose what kind of art project they wanted to do. And then there was a therapist that was sort of just like helping them get through it. And then we would notice from there what children needed other help, and then we'd give them more
Uh-huh.
professional help. Just getting teenagers together, because often if you say to a teenager like, what's wrong or what do you need, they're like, everything's fine. So
Right.
getting them together with some counselors and just giving them the opportunity to express themselves and to get through. So these are the kinds of just very very creative programming that we had to start doing, and until today. I'll say that our organization does all kinds of therapy, agricultural therapy, we have a horse farm that we do therapy, where we give children different kinds of therapy, art therapy, like I mentioned, just everything to try to get whoever, get them interested in whatever they can.
How many children now do you have at Shiloh? In the center?
So in our community, we have about, I don't know, 3,000 children, but we give services to the whole area, not only
Wait a minute,
to,
wait a minute. The Shiloh Israel Children's Fund is taking
yes,
care of 3,000 children?
for sure. Yes. Yes. We
That
give about, I'll tell you a little bit what we do. First of all, it's not only Shiloh. It's called the Shiloh's Children's Fund, but we provide services to children in the entire area, and not only in our area, in the greater area of Shiloh, in Samaria. As far as Jerusalem, like I said, we did some treatments in the south. Actually, anybody who would like to can go onto our website, israelchildren.org, and really can see the amazing things that we are doing, and also can get involved if they wanted to help. But yes, there are thousands of therapy programs. We have a therapy center where people can come and get therapy, but we also send mobile therapists. And like I said, therapy in schools, therapy at the horse farm. So we have a bunch of different locations, and we also try to work on education, like to combine education and therapy, because bring it into the schools, because not every child or parent will always reach out. So because the needs and the situation is so crazy, that's what we're doing today.
So, but um, do any of these children or these families live on site? Like I had the impression that these children were living, or maybe the families were living on site at Shiloh
In
Children's.
Shiloh, yeah, yeah. So a lot of the children,
And
they
I don't
yeah.
mean just in the town, I mean at your center.
No, they don't live at our center. No, no, no. Our center is it's not a home. It's a therapy center where people can come and get services.
Okay. And it's in the
But
town of Shiloh.
Yeah, in the town of Shiloh, and like I said, it's not only the town of Shiloh,
Right.
it's communities all around throughout Samaria.
Uh-huh.
Very, very widespread. Yeah.
So you must have, how many people do you have working there?
So
3,000 children.
we
Yeah.
have a in our therapy center, we have, and that's one of our projects, we have a staff of about 65
Huh.
therapists working there. And that's just in the center. We have freelance people and we have all kinds of different programs that we bring into schools and even some homes. So yeah, it's very widespread. And like I said, we see a very, very drastic increase in the needs and the requests, obviously, since October 7th. Actually, in the beginning, I would say that, there was so sort of like almost people were just kind of frozen and didn't know what to do. But as time goes on and the impacts of this ongoing war have become so apparent, so we see the stress and the emotional stress, the mental distress that's coming up in everybody. But again, our focus is on children.
Okay. Well, that's boy, that's amazing. Well, we've come to the end of the end of of this segment, and in the next segment, I'm going to be asking you about a number of things. First of all, like um, what things the kids talk about, what diagnoses you've been seeing
Mhm.
most of, what you do on a day-to-day basis,
Okay.
that kind of thing. So.
Okay.
So we'll take a break now. You're listening to Dr. Carol's Couch. My guest is Chava Kleinman, and we're talking about what is really going on in Israel. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carol Lieberman. We're talking today about Inside Israel, where trauma is routine and silence suspicious, with my guest, Chava Kleinman, who is the vice president of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, which we have now learned is this humongous institution, uh, organization. I don't mean it's not like a.
Right.
Don't think one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Um,
Right. Not yet.
yeah, I mean maybe, and it really, so I have a lot of questions for you.
Sure.
At the end of this segment, we're going to be telling you, giving out the website again for where you can go to looking at more detail about Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, and also, where you can go to find out more and how you can contribute. Because obviously, I mean, 3,000 kids. That's a lot of children to take care of, and because we know that they are suffering, especially now after October 7th. I want to just tell you, um, I am have been doing therapy with people from Israel
That's amazing.
by Zoom. I've been doing this for several months now, a year, I don't know, something like that, 6 months, a year.
That's great.
I lost track of time.
Yeah.
But I do it by Zoom, and there is no more satisfying work to do than with people from Israel and after terrorism, and people in America are in denial because they don't understand, and I talk about this in my videos. They don't understand that that Israel is just the canary in the coal mine, and that this is what is planned for America too. So don't, why?
Right. Well, we just saw the terror attack in Colorado.
Right, right. But I mean, if you look at Europe, Europe
Yeah.
is, I just saw some pictures today about the people in France who uh, there are so many radical Islamists in Europe, France and England and Belgium and Germany, all over Italy, um, and destroying the cultures of these countries. And I just saw a video today that that showed a picture of, I mean, it was a real life, it was a few days ago, of radical Islamists attacking, so to speak, the statue of Joan of Arc. They were climbing up did you see that news?
Wow.
With
No. Wow.
Palestinian flags and, just it's such a shocking, I mean, it shouldn't be so shocking after this time. I think also
Yeah.
that the church um, was a terror attack um, years ago, a couple of years ago.
Wow.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
but I mean, what it shows is the absolute disrespect and more than that, the anti, in this case, French, the desire to destroy the French culture. They're climbing
Wow.
all over her, um, making a total mess, hanging Palestinian flags.
Ugh.
I,
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
anyhow,
Yes.
so tell us about what some of and let me also say something else. I get you don't I guess you don't know that do you know that I am the terrorist therapist?
I actually listened to one of your shows and I heard that.
One of my Dr. Carol's house
Yeah.
shows.
Yes.
Okay, I guess I do mention it from time to
I
time.
heard you refer to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, since 9/11, I have been working
Wow.
for
Wow.
free. I'm devoting myself
Wow.
to helping people cope with terrorism, not
That's
just
amazing.
children, but people in general. And of course, that started with America with 9/11, and then went
Right.
to England, um,
Wow.
and that because of their 7/7, which was their 9/11, and
Right.
then
Wow.
went to Paris because my book
Wow.
I wrote two books on terrorism, but one of them kept getting awards like from England,
Wow.
from France, and all that.
It's amazing.
And that's called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists. Oh my, how to protect
Wow.
your child in a time of terror. I'll tell you
Wow.
about that. But anyhow, so
Hmm.
I've been to so England and France and Belgium and and now Israel, helping people with this. But it's so frustrating that people in America do not get it that radical Islamists, that Islam in general, the plan is to take over the world,
Oh, yeah.
and to put everybody under Sharia law, and so it's not just something that's happening in Israel, and it's not just something that's even happening in France. I mean, yes, it is happening in all these places, but not only it's in America too. With all the college students, the protests, and all that. It is
Yeah.
here.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. So tell us about what you do on a daily basis because you're the vice president. So do you do therapy too, or just organizational
Right. So,
work?
so at this point, I'm not doing direct therapy. I mean, I have a lot of conversations with people, and I actually supervise some of the therapists, but I'm not doing it myself because, like I said, just trying to coordinate what's been going on and put in proposals and trying to get the resources together and get it out to people is just become so much work. So. Yeah, so basically we what I do is I go around to the different programs that we have and I see what's going on and I see what they've given their request to me and try to figure out what we need to keep going and how we can expand if we can expand or if we can better use our resources in a different way. That's a lot of what we've been doing because like I said the needs are so great and this is not ending anytime soon, unfortunately. So that's what basically what I've been doing,
Let me
and
just
as
ask
well,
you,
it's very,
I mean, of
yeah,
course, with all, it's such a huge program, you need
yeah.
a lot of resources to keep it going. So do you have, like, do the therapists um, get paid, or are they volunteers, or a combination?
So no, at this point, most of the therapists are getting paid because it's sort of like what I said, in the beginning of the war, everybody was volunteering to do everything and just, and it was amazing. But how long could that go on for, Dr. Carole? I mean,
Right,
people in the end, they need, they have to make a living,
right.
and they have to support their families, especially many of them, their husbands have been off to war, and that had a huge impact on families, both financially and also, of course, emotionally. I mean, there was just so much going on. Like, it's unbelievable. And what we're seeing in children today is they're obviously children who, and not only children, but are experiencing sleep disturbances, obviously very heightened anxiety. Some of them have become withdrawn or kind of, depressed. Some are acting out. Many of them are just acting out, and regression, bedwetting, clinginess, fear of being alone, all those kind of things that obviously you can imagine are happening. Teenagers also, we're seeing signs of depression, kind of hopelessness, like, why, what is there to live for almost. And also some of like, unfortunately, some of my children are 23, 25, and like I said, 27. Two of them are reserve soldiers basically for the entire war. And at a certain point, also, unfortunately, soldiers are getting killed. Their friends are getting killed. They're going to funerals all the time. When 20-year-olds should be, going to parties and having fun, they're going to funerals. And then there's a kind of this guilt of, you know, why him and not me? And, they don't say it, but I,
Right.
sometimes kind of try to sit and talk to their friends and just kind of help them get through this. So there's a lot of the signs that we're seeing, especially over time. Um, and also this, the rockets and the sirens and this feeling of you never know what's going to happen. Even you never know who's going to knock on your door. And I don't know how many people know this, but this is a thing here in Israel. Unfortunately, when the army comes to tell somebody that has been killed, God forbid, they knock on your door, and everybody has that fear. I'm telling you that when they hear someone knock on the door,
Oh, wow.
take a deep breath. Who is knocking at my door? And this is really, it's like if you talk to any Israeli, they'll tell you about this syndrome of who's knocking at my door. And so it's this feeling of from every direction, you don't know what's going on. And so it's like this constant feeling that you need to be alert, and sort of that you're not sure where this chronic stress, and that's obviously wearing down children and of course parents as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Are you is there more have you seen more breakdowns, into like psychotic disorders?
Yeah, so yes, definitely. We've seen a lot of that. I will say that, and I think it's always important to say this, and I always remind myself of this, that thank God people are resilient. Children and not only children, people have a lot of resilience. But like I said before, as time goes on, I think that there's nobody that hasn't had, I'm not saying everybody's had a psychotic breakdown, obviously, but everybody's had a breakdown, at least one. But I mean, I'm not saying just, it like really like where, if you talk to them, their bodies are shaking, they can't sleep, they don't feel like themselves. I can personally say that this happened to me, and I realized, it took me a little bit to realize what was going on. And I said, okay, you know what, Chava, you need a bit of a break from this. You need to focus on yourself. You have to get back to a routine. And this is also something we tell people. You need a routine. It's important, to do whatever you do with exercise, to have regular meals, to have like a schedule. There was times throughout the war where there wasn't school or people weren't going to work because of the sirens and the rockets, and all these things that have been going on. And so, yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, there are the families or the people that have been more affected. If it's special needs people or people who have had previous trauma, previous trauma, people have been through either terror attacks, and then this happens and it brings it all up again. And obviously, those people, react in a very difficult way and need immediate help often.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think we're seeing really really everything that there is, but it's not surprising with the intensity of what's going on here.
So have you been seeing a significant improvement? I mean, it's so hard to have, I'm sure you have seen improvement,
Yes.
but it's also so hard because, as you were alluding to,
Hmm.
I mean, the war isn't over, and
Right.
we don't know what's going to be happening in the next in the next minute, no less.
Exactly. Right.
Iran and nuclear weapons and also, the sense. I mean, I've had some of the people who I've been helping from Israel by Zoom, um,
Yeah.
a number of them, if not all of them, have said that what bothers them the most, or is the fact that this was such a surprise. That why with Israel, with it's the best in the world for all this high tech stuff and military stuff and strategy and all of that.
Right.
How did
Yeah.
this happen in the first place?
Yeah.
That pierced that veil also,
That's right.
Um,
Right.
so how did
Right.
this happen in the
And
first?
I mean, and that's what, well, I'm just gonna say, and that's why I think that our focus is in the Sheila Israel Children's Fund is to, it's not, one, let's bring in a little intervention, or we're talking about long-term healing, programs that we can keep going. Like I said, some are in schools where it's easy accessible, or making the therapy in our center very accessible, whether it's because it's close by or because we subsidize it and it's cheaper for families, and all these things. We need to make the help that people can get very, very easy to get. And I think that's been a lot of our focus. Because, you know, actually, I'll tell you, just at the beginning of the war, at one point, I assume you know this if a trauma therapist. So you don't treat trauma while trauma is going on. Like, you do certain interventions. But at one point, we couldn't say that anymore because it was never ending. And we had to sort of
Uh-huh.
change our focus on how we're going to work and say, yes, we have to start helping people, deal, because it's not ending. So that's how I say it. We're in for the long haul. And I think that, obviously, if we can give children the first of all, just to, identify that there's something going on with them, and give them some kind of outlet, and then to build programs that we can keep and sustain going, and then we can give them a long-term path of healing. That's the way I'm seeing things right now.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and and we do see, when you give children an opportunity to express what they're going through, and like I said, there are so many different ways. One child likes art therapy, one child likes to work with animals, and one child, and that's so important, because they have to feel comfortable and relate to what they're doing. Music therapy, I mean, really, there's been so many amazing things that we've been doing.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and then we see that it does helps. It definitely helps when you get in there and give them what they need.
So tell people,
Yes.
um, tell people the website again,
Okay.
and where
Right.
their money would be going and all of that.
Yes. So, like I said, we're the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund. We have a website, very, very easy, israelchildren.org. Again, israelchildren.org. You can go onto the website and you can read about us and all the amazing programs that we're doing, and the tremendous amount of needs. And we really would love for people to partner with us and get involved. Any amount can help. There's all different options on the website. Help support therapy this, and get involved. You can feel free to contact me. My information is also on the website if you have any more questions. Like I said, israelchildren.org, very easy. Please go online, learn more about us, and help us, and help the children to grow and be the next generation, a strong, resilient generation.
Well, I don't know any place else that people could put their money that would be as valuable. I just want to mention again my terroristtherapist.com website, because I would like people to go there and watch these videos, especially, of course, the October 7th video, which which really describes not only about October 7th in Israel, but about how this is a danger for all of us. Israel is just the canary in the coal mine. Yes, they are taught to destroy Israel and kill Jews, but that's not the only part. So again, children, israelchildren.org to see about Shiloh, and it's spelled Shiloh, which is why I
That's
keep
right. That's right.
why I keep saying Shiloh, but it's
Yeah. Yeah. Shiloh is what many people in America call it. That's fine.
well, thank you
Yes.
so much, Shava. Uh,
Thank you.
thank you for what you're doing, number one, and thank you for being on the show and explaining it so eloquently. And my heart and wishes go to you and all your good work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carole. Thank you for the opportunity and invite all of you to visit our website and to get involved and help us with this very important mission.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for listening. You've been listening to Dr. Carole's Couch.